The morning sun filtered softly through blinds, painting the living room in strokes of gold. Ethan sat at the edge of the couch, his hands wrapped around a half-empty mug of coffee that had long gone cold. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating. He wasn't sure when it started. This distance, this quiet storm brewing between him and his wife, Laura. They used to talk for hours about everything and nothing. Now, they barely exchanged more than a few polite words. But something had been gnawing at him lately, a gut feeling he couldn't shake. Laura's sudden late-night grocery trips, the whispered phone calls that ended the moment he entered the room, the faint smell of cologne that wasn't his. That morning, Ethan decided he couldn't take it anymore. When she told him she was going to the gym, he waited a few minutes, then followed, keeping a careful distance. Her car didn't turn toward the fitness center, as she said it would. Instead, it veered down Maple Street, the same street their neighbor, Daniel, lived on. Daniel, the charming widower next door. Always friendly, always smiling, always too available when Laura needed help with small things around the house. Ethan parked a few houses down and sat there, heart pounding in his chest. He watched as Laura knocked on Daniel's door, hesitated for a moment, then slipped inside. He waited. Minutes turned into what felt like hours. Every second tightened the noose around his sanity. Finally, he got out of the car, his steps unsteady, a mix of fury and heartbreak pulsing through him. The door was unlocked. That alone sent a chill down his spine. He stepped inside quietly, his breath shallow. From the living room, faint laughter drifted through the air, hers. That soft, familiar laugh he hadn't heard in months. And then he saw them. Laura was sitting on the edge of Daniel's kitchen counter, her hands tangled in his hair, lips pressed against his. Ethan froze, the world tilting around him. Time slowed. The sound of his heart pounding in his ears drowned out everything else. When she finally noticed him standing there, her face went pale. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel stumbled back, guilt etched across his face. Ethan said nothing. He just stared, eyes hollow, face unreadable. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could. The woman he'd built a life with, the one he trusted above all, had shattered everything in a single, merciless moment. The silence between them stretched until it became unbearable. Then, quietly, Ethan spoke. "How long?" Laura's lips parted, but no words came out. She tried to reach for him, but he stepped back. "How long, Laura?" His voice was calm, too calm. Tears welled in her eyes. "It just happened. I didn't mean..." He laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and hollow. People don't accidentally betray the person who loves them. He turned toward the door, every step feeling heavier than the last. But as he reached the porch, something inside him snapped. He stopped, gripping the doorframe, his voice shaking as he spoke, without turning around. "You know what's funny, Laura? I was going to surprise you today. I got the job, the promotion we prayed for. I want to take you out, celebrate, start fresh." He let out a broken laugh. "Guess that doesn't matter anymore." Laura's sobs echoed behind him, but he didn't look back. He walked out into the morning light, his world collapsing quietly around him. That night, as rain tapped against the window, Ethan sat alone in his car parked by the lake where they once used to go on dates. He replayed every memory, every smile, every lie, every moment that now felt tainted. He didn't know what hurt more, losing her, or realizing she was already gone long before today. Yet deep down beneath the pain, something else stirred, a quiet, dangerous calm. He wiped his face, his expression hardening as his reflection stared back from the glass. This wasn't the end. Not yet. He sat there, staring at his reflection in the window, rain streaking down like silent tears over his ghosted image. The rhythmic tapping on the windshield matched the chaos in his chest. Every breath he took felt jagged, scraping against his throat. He could still see it. Laura's eyes wide in shock, Daniel's guilty expression, the sound of her voice cracking as she said his name. He wished he could unsee it, wished he could erase it all. But pain had a strange way of turning into clarity. Ethan gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Memories flooded him. Their first day at the same lake, the The way she laughed when he accidentally spilled coffee on himself. The promises they made when they moved into their house. He had built his entire world around her. And now, that world had been quietly dismantled by the very person he trusted most. He turned on the ignition, the soft hum of the engine grounding him. His phone buzzed again, her name flashing across the screen. He let it ring, staring at it until it went silent. Then another buzz, a message. "Ethan, please. I'm sorry. Can we talk?" He almost laughed. Talk. That word felt so useless now. He tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and drove aimlessly, his mind caught between rage and heartbreak. The city lights blurred past his window, neon reflections slicing through the darkness. Every face he passed felt distant, unreal, like he was trapped in someone else's nightmare. Eventually, his car slowed outside a small diner, one he hadn't been to in years, a place that smelled like burnt coffee and late-night confessions. Inside, the air was warm and heavy with the scent of grease. Ethan took a booth in the corner, away from the chatter. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, came over. "You look like you could use something strong," she said softly. "Coffee's fine," he muttered. She nodded, studying him for a moment before walking away. When the cup arrived, he stared at it blankly, the steam rising between his trembling hands. He didn't even taste it when he drank. His mind was elsewhere, back home in that kitchen where everything broke. He didn't notice the man who slid into the booth across from him until he spoke. "Rough night." Ethan blinked, startled. It was an old acquaintance, Mark, a co-worker from years ago. "Mark? Wow, yeah, something like that." Mark nodded knowingly. "You look like someone who's been hit by a freight train." Ethan gave a tired smile. "Feels about right." There was a pause. Mark's gaze softened. "You want to talk about it?" And before Ethan realized it, the words began to spill out. Every detail, every ache. The betrayal, the image he couldn't unsee, the silence that followed. Mark didn't interrupt. He just listened, his expression grave. When Ethan finished, there was a long silence. Then Mark said quietly, "You've got two choices, man. Let this destroy you or let it build something new." Ethan looked up. "Build what? Everything I cared about is gone." Mark shrugged. "Then start caring about something else. Maybe start with yourself." The simplicity of it hit him harder than he expected. Start with yourself. When was the last time he'd done that? Everything he did, every plan, every sacrifice had been for them, for her. Mark left him with a firm pat on the shoulder and the bill already paid. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of thunder. Ethan stood there for a while, breathing in the night. His phone buzzed again, this time, not just messages from Laura, but from Daniel, too. One read, "Please don't do anything stupid." He almost smashed the phone against the pavement. Instead, he slipped it back into his pocket and started walking. The quiet streets echoed with his footsteps, the weight in his chest pressing down heavier with every step. When he finally reached home, the house looked different, colder, like the warmth had been sucked out. The lights inside were still on. She was there. He stood at the front door for a long moment before unlocking it. Laura was sitting on the couch, her eyes swollen and red. When she saw him, she stood up quickly. "Ethan, please." "Don't," he said, voice low but sharp. "Don't come closer." She froze. He looked around the house. The framed photos on the walls, the memories captured in still images that now felt like lies. "You brought him here, didn't you?" he asked quietly. Tears streamed down her face. "No, never here. I swear, Ethan." "Don't swear on anything," he interrupted. His tone wasn't loud, but it was cold enough to make her flinch. "You swore a lot of things before, remember?" She sank onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. Ethan turned away, his throat tightening. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered between sobs. "It started when you got so distant. I felt invisible. Daniel just listened. I was weak, Ethan. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake." Her words hung in the air. He wanted to shout, to tell her she had no right to use loneliness as an excuse. but the anger that had been raging inside him began to twist into something else. Exhaustion. He walked over to the window, looking out into the quiet night. "You could have talked to me," he said softly. "Instead, you tore everything apart." She stood, slowly stepping closer. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it right if you let me." He turned to face her. For a moment, their eyes met, two people standing in the ruins of what used to be love. "I don't know if there's anything left to fix," he said quietly. She broke down again, collapsing into tears. Ethan didn't move to comfort her this time. He just stood there, watching the woman he once loved crumble. His heart still ached, but something deep inside was shifting, a numb acceptance creeping in. Maybe some things weren't meant to be repaired. Maybe some endings happened long before the final chapter was written. But as he turned to leave, Laura's trembling voice stopped him. "Ethan, please don't walk away. Not like this." He paused, his hand on the doorknob. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they couldn't say. "Good night, Laura," he whispered, his voice breaking slightly. He stepped out into the cold air again, closing the door behind him, not slamming it, not shouting, just closing quietly, like sealing away a memory. He walked down the driveway, his footsteps slow and deliberate. The street was empty, the air heavy with mist. Each breath he took felt cleaner, lighter, but his chest still hurt. When he reached his car, he didn't get in immediately. Instead, he leaned against it, staring up at the dark sky. The clouds had finally parted, revealing faint stars. For the first time in what felt like years, he noticed how quiet the night could be. But even in that stillness, the echo of her sobs lingered in his mind. And somewhere, deep inside, a question he wasn't ready to face yet began to form. What would come next? The stars hung like distant witnesses above him as Ethan stood under the pale streetlight, his breath visible in the cool night air. The world around him was so quiet, yet inside him, everything screamed. He didn't know where to go or what to do next. Every step away from that house felt like walking out of a graveyard, his heart buried somewhere behind those walls, beneath layers of betrayal and memories that refused to die. He got into his car, but didn't start it. He sat there, staring at the house one last time. Through the window, he could still see the faint flicker of the living room light. The same room where they had once danced barefoot after dinner, where they had laughed at nothing, where promises were made that now meant nothing. Tears stung his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. Not again. He had cried enough for her, for them. Now, the tears were gone, replaced by something steadier. Not anger, not hatred, just finality. He started the engine and drove with no destination in mind. The night swallowed him whole, the road stretching endlessly before him like a new chapter waiting to be written. His phone buzzed on the seat again, another message from Laura. He didn't look. He rolled down the window and let the cold wind whip through his hair, drowning out everything except the sound of his heartbeat. He drove for hours, through empty streets and sleeping towns, until dawn began to break. The sky shifted from black to deep violet, then to soft gold, as the first light of morning spread across the horizon. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt the weight in his chest begin to lift. He pulled over near the edge of a small town, a place he didn't recognize, quiet and untouched by the chaos he'd left behind. Across the road stood a small coffee shop, just opening for the day. A young woman flipped a sign on the door to open, her breath fogging the glass. Something about the simplicity of it, the ordinary rhythm of life continuing, struck him deeply. He went inside. The bell above the door chimed softly. The woman behind the counter smiled warmly, the kind of genuine smile that didn't ask questions, didn't pity. "Morning," she said. "Rough night?" Ethan gave a faint, tired smile. Something like that. "Coffee. Black. Please." As he sat by the window, watching the sunlight pour in, he realized how strange healing felt at first, not like a clean break, but like a slow thaw. Pain didn't vanish. It just softened around the edges, making room for something else to grow. He watched the world wake up outside. People walking dogs, a mother holding her child's hand, an old man reading a newspaper on the bench. Ordinary moments, beautiful in their simplicity. For so long, Ethan had been living for the idea of perfection, the perfect marriage, the perfect life, the perfect love. But maybe, he thought, perfection was just an illusion that blinded him to what truly mattered. His phone vibrated again. This time, he picked it up. One message stood out among the flood of others. It wasn't from Laura. It was from his sister, someone he hadn't spoken to in months. "Mom told me you've been quiet lately. Come visit us, Ethan. It might do you good." He stared at the message for a long moment, then smiled softly. Maybe that was exactly what he needed. To go back, to remember who he was before everything fell apart. He texted back, "I'll be there soon. By noon." Ethan was back on the road, heading toward the countryside where he grew up. The further he drove, the more the city's noise faded behind him, replaced by the sound of wind brushing through trees, the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of peace returning. Hours later, he parked in front of an old farmhouse surrounded by tall fields. The air smelled of rain and earth, of home. His mother stepped out onto the porch when she saw him. She didn't say a word. She just walked over and hugged him, tightly, like she used to when he was a boy who'd scraped his knees. And for the first time in weeks, Ethan let go. He let the tears fall, let the pain spill out, let himself be small again. That night, he sat on the porch under the stars, the same stars he used to count as a child. His mother joined him quietly, handing him a cup of tea. "Sometimes," she said softly, "God breaks us just enough to make room for something new to grow." He didn't answer right away. He just looked up at the sky, vast, endless, forgiving. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was not the end, but the painful beginning of something better. Days turned into weeks. Ethan started helping his mother around the farm, fixing fences, repainting old furniture, repairing what was broken, not just outside, but within himself. He began to sleep better, eat better, breathe better. Then one afternoon, as he was sitting by the barn cleaning tools, he heard laughter, a soft melodic sound that made him look up. It was a neighbor's daughter, Maya, walking over with a basket of apples. She smiled shyly. "Mom said to share these. She baked too many pies." Ethan chuckled, taking the basket. "I didn't think there was such a thing as too much pie." She laughed. "Guess you'll have to help us find out." As she turned to leave, she looked back. "You should come by sometime. We could use another hand at the orchard." He hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe I will." When she walked away, he found himself smiling, genuinely, effortlessly. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something, a flicker of life where there had been only ashes. That evening, he stood by the window, watching the sunset paint the fields in shades of amber and rose. He realized something then, that healing wasn't about forgetting or pretending the pain never happened. It was about learning to live again, one heartbeat at a time. He thought of Laura, not with anger, not even with sadness anymore, but with acceptance. She had been a chapter, not the whole story. A chapter that had to end for him, to begin again. He whispered into the fading light, "Thank you for teaching me how strong I can be." The wind rustled through the fields, as if carrying his words away. That night, he sat under the stars again, the same ones that had watched him break and rebuild. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel lost. He felt free. The pain had turned into peace. The betrayal had become wisdom. The emptiness had been replaced with quiet strength. As the moon rose high above, Ethan smiled a real, unforced smile. He knew he would love again someday. But this time, it wouldn't be out of fear of being alone. It would be because he had finally learned the most important truth of all, that the greatest love story begins when you finally learn to love yourself. The night stretched endlessly before him, calm and full of promise. And somewhere deep inside he could feel it, the quiet beginning of something beautiful.